Coming up on Fresh Freedom, we're blowing the lid off the Inflation Reduction Act, a $1 trillion scam dressed up as a green revolution. Welcome to the Fresh Freedom Podcast, featuring freedom-focused representatives who are fighting for conservative values and defending your constitutional rights. I'm Nate Lucas, tonight joined by Representative Eric Burleson from Missouri's 7th Congressional District, and our special guest is Ben Lieberman, a senior fellow at the Competitive Enterprise Institute. Ben brings a deep expertise in environmental policy with years of experience on Capitol Hill, working on energy infrastructure, fuel standards, and regulatory reform. It is great to be with you, Ben, and Congressman.
Well, thank you.
So there is a lot going on here in Capitol Hill, reconciliation, and one of the things that Republicans have been talking about ever since it got signed into law was the opportunity to repeal a lot of the energy issues in the Inflation Reduction Act that Joe Biden signed into.
The quote-unquote Inflation Reduction Act that really actually drove up inflation, right? Otherwise known as the Green New Scam.
Renewable energies that we're coming to learn are really just a way for seemingly lines Democrat pockets, and our grids aren't as safe, and we're now more reliant on China for our energy, which is really a great concern.
Yeah, I don't know if the bill is more about addressing climate change or cashing in on climate change. There's all too many provisions that seem like the latter.
So when you look at this, Congressman, I mean, what has been the chatter behind closed doors with, and how aggressive Republicans want to get in terms of at least repealing certain aspects of this to get it back on track?
Yeah, I'd say the Trump administration, when he came in, he said that he wanted a full repeal of everything in the IRA. A full and immediate repeal in order to pay for the tax cuts to the middle class. So his tax cuts, to extend his tax cuts, make them permanent, and then also to add the no tax on tip, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security. In order to accomplish that, how are you going to pay for it in a reconciliation bill? And one of the ways in which you could pay for it is through eliminating these green energy tax credits. And so the CBO scored it at $825 billion over a 10-year period. So just under $1 trillion, and some other groups have scored it at over $1 trillion. I think independent private groups like Goldman Sachs and others scored it. In other words, if we do nothing, the American taxpayer is going to pay, approximately $1 trillion over the next 10 years, or $100 billion in a year on average, towards these green energy tax credits in order to continue down this path of building solar and wind all across the United States. And by repealing that, we're putting, instead of paying for these, we're putting money back in the American people's pockets, and let the market decide where electricity is generated. That's it in a nutshell. That's the decision that we have to make.
Would you like to follow up on that?
Well, I think every dollar of additional money that goes out the door on the Inflation Reduction Act is just another dollar taken from the American taxpayer. And that's where my sympathies lie, not with the companies that are taking advantage of all these subsidies. They can invest in wind and solar and whatever else, but do it with their own money, 100 cents on the dollar. Don't expect free money from the government. And I would add, there's plenty of folks in Congress who like to complain about corporations not paying their fair share, or ExxonMobil getting special tax breaks. Well, if you're really serious about that stuff, a great place to start would be repealing the Inflation Reduction Act.
So can I play a clip? This is from a great show. This is Landman. Billy Bob Thornton stars in it. He is an oil field mogul, and he uses this opportunity to really showcase to a naive individual how interchanged or these renewable energies really intersect with fossil fuel infrastructure. So let's play clip 1 here and get your reaction.
Who owns them?
Oil companies. We use them to power the wells. No electricity out here. We're off the grid.
They use clean energy to power the oil wells?
They use alternative energy. There's nothing clean about this. You have any idea how much diesel they have to burn to mix that much concrete or make that steel and haul this out here and put it together with a 450-foot crane? You want to guess how much oil it takes to lubricate that thing or winterize it? And its 20-year lifespan, it won't offset the carbon footprint of making it. And don't get me started on solar panels and the lithium in your Tesla battery. If the whole world decided to go electric tomorrow, we don't have the transmission lines to get the electricity to the cities. It'd take 30 years if we started tomorrow. And believe me, if Exxon thought them things right there were the future, they'd be putting them all over the place. Getting oil out of the ground is the most dangerous job in the world. We don't do it because we like it. We do it because we run out of options.
Wow.
I think that's a pretty telling clip.
I got to watch this show.
He's awesome.
Yeah. It's called Landman.
Landman, yeah.
Wow. That's awesome.
But they're just, I mean, when you have a typical discussion with somebody about fossil fuels that have clearly taken the bait on this radical agenda, do they even understand how like you would have to clearly go on a war against fossil fuels? What would you do with all of these? How would you get your Amazon packages?
There's no such thing as a perfect energy source. There's trade-offs everywhere. And that's what we're learning with the Inflation Reduction Act. The stuff that's being subsidized, well, it needs those subsidies for a reason. For example, the wind and solar electricity wouldn't be feasible at all except for reliable 24/7 coal, natural gas, hydro, nuclear power. These intermittent sources are really almost a parasite on the electricity system. And we don't realize these things when we romanticize about them and subsidize them. But there's so many uneconomic and really impractical sources that are being encouraged in the Inflation Reduction Act. And we need a dose of reality. And I think Billy Bob gave us a little bit of that.
He typically does. There's a tweet here from the mayor of Los Angeles, Karen Bass. She's been in the news for a lot of things. And this is from September 6th of 2020. The tweet to this day is still up. But she wrote, "It's almost 3 p.m. Time to turn off major appliances, set the thermostat to 78 degrees or use a fan instead. Turn off excess lights and unplug any appliances you're not using. We need every Californian to help conserve energy. Please do your part. #FlexAlert." How in 2025 can you sell that message to Americans that you actually need to have less so we can conserve more?
And this is from a state that has an abundance of energy. Most of it's still in the ground or beneath the sea floor, but they have an abundance of energy that they've placed off limits. No, it's not a message that's sellable, nor should it be sellable. There's nothing wrong with having a high standard of living. There's nothing wrong with having air conditioning, which by one study's estimate saves 18,000 lives per year from heat-related deaths. There's nothing wrong with these things. We shouldn't be ashamed of energy. We should be proud of the standard of living that we've achieved in the United States, thanks in large part to energy, chiefly fossil fuel energy.
I like your point that it saves lives, because I'll never forget the moment that Winter Storm Uri came through, and you had all these brownouts happening, and you had 150 something people died in Texas. They froze to death. Like, this is in modern America, and it's not just modern times somewhere in the world. This is in Texas, in modern America, that people froze to death. Like, this is just brutal. And it really woke me up to realize that we cannot solely rely on intermittent energy. We have to have base load. Base load is things you can, when you need electricity, you can flip a switch and generate more. You can't flip a switch on the sun or on the wind. You got to rely on Mother Nature. But when people are freezing to death, I don't think that they care what you're burning as long as you're creating heat, right? And so at the end of the day, I feel like we've had a lost couple of decades of economic prosperity and opportunity chasing this green energy scam. And as a result, America is we have a lot less electricity production, and it's more expensive. And at some point, I think that we have, and Donald Trump has woken up this situation, and hopefully we're able to return to a normal economy here.
The second clip I wanted to play, this is Donald Trump. You might recall he was speaking at the UN, and he was warning Germany that over-reliance on Russian energy would ultimately be problematic for them. And you might remember their reaction.
Germany will become totally dependent on Russian energy if it does not immediately change course. Here in the Western Hemisphere, we are committed to maintaining our independence from the encroachment of expansionist foreign powers. It has been the formal policy of our country since President Monroe that we reject the interference of foreign nations in this hemisphere and in our own affairs.
The telling part through that clip is the reaction from those that he is speaking to. They're mocking him. And now there are stories out from even just a couple of years ago that while food prices in Germany has seen increases 23%, price of pork goes up 59%, they're getting absolutely smacked in the face by relying on foreign energy. And all of their goods have risen in cost. And they're paying the price for that. And they were laughing at the president just 5 years ago.
And that could happen here, and to an extent already is. But we're not as bad as Europe on many of these policies. But I hope we can use Europe as a warning sign and repeal things like the Inflation Reduction Act. I would add that if you really want to get tough with Russia, get tough with Putin, compete with them in international energy markets. We have the oil, we have the natural gas, plenty of natural gas. And with exports of energy to those nations, not only is it good for the American economy, it's also a very powerful foreign policy tool. So it's win-win for American energy production. I would add that the fossil fuel abundance, the fracking revolution, that happened without any kind of Inflation Reduction Act type subsidies. That was what came from the American free market, and that's really the answer that we need for our energy problems: removing government interference and letting the markets work, as the congressman mentioned.
Yeah, and then what we've seen in Europe is that really a sucking sound, to use the Ross Perot quote, of manufacturing and jobs leave Europe, in Germany, Great Britain, and come to the United States or go to China, mostly go to China. And the reason is that these manufacturers, who rely on abundant, affordable electricity, can't operate in a location where energy costs are exceeding inflation, right? And so if you are a manufacturer, why would you want to stick around in a country that's on the warpath against your electricity?
It's the smug behavior of these foreign leaders towards Donald Trump. I mean, he faces that even inside Washington, D.C., with your colleagues even going against him on some of these ideas.
Yeah, I mean, that clip from 2018, that's what I was keying in on, is that this is what he was saying in 2018 before Russia invaded Ukraine, right? And so he's basically a fortune or a prophet there, talking about the situation that Germany is going to end up being in, which is that they're going to be subservient to Russia in order to supply energy for their country.
This is something that we've discussed before on Fresh Freedom, but this is a short clip. This is Al Gore in part one, and then John Kerry in part two. And you almost get the sense that this is such a passion of theirs. Obviously, John Kerry was the former climate czar who had to go pick up his climate awards taking private air travel across the pond because he had no other way of getting there, and had to laugh in your face while he said that. But here they are, and this is...
There is a 75% chance that the entire North Polar ice cap during some of the summer months could be completely ice-free within the next 5 to 7 years.
You have sea ice, which is melting at a rate that the Arctic Ocean now increasingly is exposed. In 5 years, scientists predict we will have the first ice-free Arctic summer.
When was that? When they said
Al Gore, this is 2009.
Okay.
When he said that 75%
Within 5 years.
within 5 years
Okay.
would melt. And John Kerry's remarks were also in 2009. But they've been saying this for a lot longer than 2009, and yet they keep moving the goalposts on when it's all going to come to an end.
It reminds me of the joke about the Soviet official who was such a visionary that none of his predictions have come true. And that's what we're getting here. One can only hope that the public is starting to wise up, and I think they are. Let's not forget this was a massive climate bill that was not sold as such. It was called the Inflation Reduction Act. There was an understanding that this isn't selling with the American people. So the hype, the alarmism isn't going over. The American people are wising up. Now, there's still ways to slip this stuff through. And as we know, so much of this money is already out the door. There's all kinds of activists that will have so much money to spend. They'll be active on this for years and years to come. We're trying to claw back. The administration is trying to claw back what it can. But damage has already been done under the Inflation Reduction Act. But let's not forget, this was a deceptively named bill. This was probably the most egregious example of congressional bait and switch ever, because the climate hype just isn't working.
Liberalism seems to have plenty of brain rot included in it, but this particular disease seems to have infected quite a few. Even looking at young people like a Greta Thunberg, I don't know how she's going to be capable of living her life with the amount of bait she's taken on this. And it's not just her. There's
a lot of the members of Congress that are the really young Democrats. They're still, beating this drum that that we're going to destroy the climate. And at the end of the day, to me, we're facing a national security crisis when it comes to energy, because after World War II, the United States was producing 60% of the world's GDP. So we were manufacturing 60% of the world's GDP. And that's how we won World War II. That's how we became the superpower of the world. China today produces 40% of the world's GDP, and the United States is down to 11%. So were we to go to war today, unfortunately, China could out-manufacture us in any war, right? So, and how do we stop that tide? We've got to get cheap, abundant, affordable, reliable electricity. And so these individuals can scream all day long about saving the planet, but the truth is we need to save the country right now. The country and our future is at stake in the immediate windshield right now. That's what we're facing.
Well, it's pretty cool. Next week, as the chairman of the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Energy Policy, and Regulatory Affairs, along with the Subcommittee on Healthcare and Financial Services with Chairman Glenn Grothman, there will be a hearing. Mandates, meddling, and mismanagement, the IRA's threat to energy and medicine. Mr. Lieberman, you will be a witness in that hearing, and be sure to follow their official X accounts on X at Rep. Eric Burleson and at CEI.org. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Stand strong, stay informed, and keep fighting for freedom.